So good afternoon and good morning, good afternoon and good evening to those that are following us virtually. Very pleased to welcome you in this session of the Global Innovation Hub, focusing today on green hydrogen. The Global Innovation Hub is an initiative of the UNFCCC Secretariat launched at COP26. The main purpose is to explore how we can enhance the effectiveness of innovation in serving people and the planet. And to do so, what we are really focusing on is on how the different stakeholders that are potential climate actors can paint the future that they would like to have for themselves, for their children, and for their grandchildren, and take this as starting point, conduct a backcasting scenario, translate this future into short to medium term goal, actionable goal that will guide their action now. We will see very quickly that the future that we want to build and the current capability do not match. You will have a gap. And this is precisely that gap between the future that we want to build and our current capability that will be the main driver for innovation. So during the entire day, our focus will be on how value chains such as green hydrogen can be developed and deployed at scale, leveraging innovation. But without further ado, I will give the floor, after having welcomed you warmly, including Madam Minister Anja Siegesmund. Thank you for coming. This is a real pleasure to host you at the Global Innovation Hub. I will now give the floor to Peter, who will moderate the session. Peter, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Masamba, for the kind introduction, also explaining once more how the Innovation Hub works and what it serves to. And as Masamba pointed out, it is our pleasure to have Minister Anja Siegesmund here, who is Minister of the Environment, Energy and Nature Conservation in the state of Thuringia. We have additional exciting other speakers in the room. I'll give you a quick preview on this, because in about 20 minutes we'll have an exclusive discussion with the Minister, and afterwards we'll join for a panel discussion with everyone. And so we will also see Mr. Khroumbaly Lehbib from the Ministry of Petroleum, Mines and Energy in the Islamic Republic of Mauritania. And we also have in the house today Bjorn Noack, who is with Bosch Powertrain Solutions and their Director of Sustainability, Sustainable Mobility Strategy. But as a start, it is my pleasure to welcome the Minister. We met a couple of days ago by chance at the COP entrance when it was closed. And so maybe we can take the stage together and we'll move this back to the beginning so we can talk about the state of Thuringia. Please give an applause for the Minister. Thank you. Gehen Sie rüber, ich komme. So, for a start, we would like to say, before you can speak on this, we would like to say a couple of words on your state, the state of Thuringia, which is in Germany. So allow me to show 2 or 3 slides for the international audience, especially those people also dialing in from abroad. Thuringia is sort of the center of Germany, and it also claims to be the center of Europe, I think, several locations in Thuringia. It's a relatively small state, but it's a very important state in terms of the logistics and the supply chains, including for green hydrogen in Europe and in Germany. We'll hear more about this later. The state of Thuringia has established a national hydrogen or state strategy on hydrogen, what we would like to talk about. And so my first question would basically be, and I'll take the seat next to you now, Minister, what is the particular location of Thuringia? What is Thuringia all about, and which role does it play in the energy transition?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to talk about Thuringia today. In this morning, I had another session, and when I introduced my state, I was asked if I am from India, which is a great state too, but it's another region, so thank you for the map. Thuringia is one of the 16 federal states in Germany, and we also call it the Green Heart. So why is that, the Green Heart? First of all, green, because 1/3 of our federal state is forest, so it's quite green, and hard, because it's in the middle of Germany, which is a very big advantage because of the question of pipelines and question of transport, especially for hydrogen. We're going to talk about that later, I think so. Let me tell you something about the companies in the industry in Thuringia. First of all, we are facing major challenges because particularly affected by structural change is the automotive and supplier industry. We're going to talk about this later too, I think, at this panel. And other key industrial sectors are optics, as well as the glass industry, and especially glass industry leads lots of support for decarbonization. That's one of the topics we discuss in our state a lot. So maybe to invite you everybody to afterwards have a quick overview about Thuringia. It's the Green Heart, and we are in the midst of a transition decade in our federal state. And our aim is to get 100% renewable until 2040. Therefore, we have an own federal state climate act, which is important to support everybody at this way to get decarbonized.
Thank you. Now, let us focus on maybe the first point you made, the particular location where it is. And I'll move back once more to the map. What role does that play in hydrogen? What are your plans for hydrogen? We heard this morning how important it is to scale up hydrogen, scale up renewable production for that, but also get the logistics right, so the transport. Share your view, please.
Well, first of all, let me tell you, this debate about especially green hydrogen is nothing new. We had it, I guess, 15 years or so ago, but the business case did not fly. You know what I mean? So we are at a point where some things must come together, so we are getting the next step all together. First of all, Thuringia has very important preconditions to get the business case fly because it's in the middle of Germany. And that means central pipelines from north to the south of Germany, but also from the east to the west, which now are used for gas transportation, are quickly possible to get them H2 ready. So what we enforce, and we have global thinking, but also local doing what we want to do, act local. What we are thinking about and discussing with our strategy is to implement some regional projects, but also to think the whole topic much bigger. That means the pipelines from the Baltic Sea to Thuringia to the very south of Germany, across Europe, and also from east to west, and that is a very comfortable position in the midst, in the center of Germany.
Thank you. Now you mentioned the 2040 target. The 2040 target is pretty ambitious. And we discussed it briefly prior to the start of this panel. It's hard to get the renewables up, ramp up the renewables. And it's also a question of how can we build up the capacity for the production? I mean, it's nice to transport through your country, but I guess you talk of the glass industry being an energy-intensive industry, for example, but there's others. Can you mention some specific steps you want to take? Like, what is your vision, even if it's not part of the official government program yet? But how can you drive this harder? How can you speed this up?
Well, first of all, I am convinced that right now we live in a decade of transition. Transition because we must get independent from fossil energy supply. And that is a chance to get the hydrogen case to fly. That's the difference maybe to the situation 15 years ago. Second advantage is there are more renewables for the... Does it work? Yes. 60% of the electricity we use in our companies, there are 70,000 companies in Thuringia, 60% of the electricity they use comes from renewables. So what we need is even more renewables, and that to get to implement them into green hydrogen. And I think that it is very important that everyone takes into account that, for instance, our glass industry, some points at their producing habits are still based on hydrogen. Some weeks before, I had a long talk to a CEO of one of our glass industry companies. They are, it's nothing new to rely on hydrogen as one of their energy supply chain bases. So what we need to do is to build up renewables because it's cheap. What we need to do is to push former gas pipelines, to push the fossil world backwards, and on the other hand, to get the green hydrogen infrastructure H2 ready, which is not too expensive because the pipelines are there. You do not need to build up every kilometer of new pipelines. So renewables are not too expensive. The pipelines can be used. And now we need other preconditions, especially concerning the political framework to get the business case fly. That's what I try in my federal state, and what also the German government does, especially today when they, let me quickly say, talk to that, one sentence more. They started projects for green hydrogen also to support other countries. So this is important too, to get the view on all global developments concerning hydrogen, not only in our state.
Right, because the task of the Global Innovation Hub is also to take lessons learned in certain regions, be they in the Global South, be they in the Global North, and try to adapt them. So you have, with your experience as a minister in your particular state in Germany, you have lessons learned. You know this term, lessons learned. So you have been through the crisis this year, you've been through previous situations. If you look at this from a bird's eye perspective and say, hey, there's a region in Egypt or in Brazil or in Italy or elsewhere in the world, what if you take some of the abstract lessons learned, what helps? How can you push because there's barriers in the way. You want to build, I mean, let's take an example from Germany. We want to build more wind power. We're not allowed to because of regulation. We want to produce more hydrogen with electrolyzers, for example, and there's not enough green electricity. So not particularly just for Thuringia, but in general, what can you advise to other policymakers in the room and who are watching online?
Well, thank you for that question. I guess the most important thing is what we do today, what you are able to do. It's all about collaboration. It's about collaboration to see what is possible from best practices maybe exist. I mean, H2 Global, which Germany suggested, is a perfect program. The German government also launched a project with Chile to get hydrogen projects to fly. But H2 Global with 900 million euros, perspective it's 3.5 billion.
Excuse me, Minister, we're just exchanging your mic.
In perspective, it's 3.5 billion euros. It's going to help for strategic partnerships And collaboration, as we can discuss it here and at this panel, will maybe help to solve technical questions together. I'm convinced we have all the technologies to get green hydrogen from renewables into the pipelines. The technologies are there, but it's still too expensive. So what we need is collaboration and further development, because there is no other way when we want to reduce the fossil footprint. If we want to go together the decarbonization of the industry, green hydrogen is one of the possibilities we have to use, and actually there's no time left to discuss whether it is necessary or not, but we must come from the debates into the projects, and therefore I think it is important to show best practices and also to seek for collaboration.
I have the minister's mic. Thank you very much. Now you're actually giving the right point to be introducing our other panelists shortly. I have one more question to you. You've raised it. It's not ready. The technologies are too expensive. They are in early TRLs, technology readiness levels. Those who weren't here this morning, we discussed extensively how far the price for electrolyzers will have to go down, how far the cost for renewable electricity will have to decrease, and so forth. So what do you do in your country, or in your role as in your ministry maybe, to identify the right innovations? Because we will obviously need to help the great ideas that are in laboratories, and we'll have a session on laboratories after this, and make it possible so they can make it to the mass market. Can you share another thought, and then we would ask our fellow panelists on stage.
Well, first of all, tell me some project you know which is innovative and which hasn't cost something. I mean, innovation is not for free. Yeah. But, I mean, everybody around here surely is also convinced that innovation with green hydrogen is one of the puzzle stones we need to get not only renewables rolled out, but on the other hand, to get the transformation done. So innovation is a driver of transformation. We are talking about transition, transformation, we talk about sufficiency, about resilience. And so I am very convinced that we need the money and also the political framework to get these projects roll out, to learn more about them. Let me tell you one we roll out in Thuringia. It's called GH2 Eco. So it's in the long, to translate it, TH for Thuringia, 2 because H2 and Eco because it's ecological and for economical reasons. One which helps our industry at the Erfurter Kreuz to get decarbonized. And it's a green hydrogen infrastructure. It's 42 kilometers and it's renewables, it's the pipeline, and in the end it's the energy supply chain which helps the glass industry and also other companies to run their business. And this is not, so to say, a future case. This is a case that will work in 2025. There are lots of partners joining that project, GH2 Eco, and I think to show that these innovative partners, they have the power, they are empowered also to do this, and I support them, the Thuringian government supports them. That's what we need, people who are courageous about new technologies that are based on renewables, that are based on a fossil-free future.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe to add, because not everybody might know what Erfurter Kreuz is, that's an industrial region, right, in your state. But it's so important, the type of cooperation you mentioned, and to also grasp projects that can deliver results soon. You say it's 2025? Is that correct?
Yeah, 2025 it's done. So
okay.
they've already started. The concepts are written, the money is on the table, so they are right now. Every step is, so to say, to get it done.
Yeah. Thank you. So we started this wish list this morning of things that need to be done to scale hydrogen quickly. Let us drive innovation harder and spend more on innovation. And you mentioned it. It's obvious it will cost something. It doesn't come for free. Spend more on innovation. With this, I'm leaving this place because I need to leave it to other panelists, and we will introduce our next speaker. Masama, do you want to do this or no? Okay. So we are very pleased to have you here, Mr. Khroumbaly Lehbib. I hope I pronounced that correct. Great. Please have your seat, and it's a pleasure that you're complementing the minister's opinion or the minister's view on this, because obviously you are a senior advisor special advisor with the Ministry of Petroleum, Mines and Energy in a completely different region with different challenges, but also very ambitious targets. We have heard from the state of Mauritania. And I would also kindly ask another colleague to take the stage. I mentioned him before, Bjorn Noack from Bosch Powertrain Solutions. So I hope we can equip both of you with microphones. You have one? I hope it's working. Okay. And we have, of course, our fourth panelist. So we need an extra chair from KPMG India. We're pleased to have you. And now, due to the short time notice, we don't have the slide prepared for you, but we have you here live. It's a pleasure having you. And who has joined is Apurba Mitra. All right. Now we have turned this Thuringia introduction into the debate into a pretty multinational, multi-continent discussion. And I would like to start with a question to Mr. Lehbib, which is, you heard statements by the minister from a German state. Now, being in a region that has such high potential, such as Mauritania, if you would try to answer, or if you would try to summarize the challenges, but also the chances for your country at the moment and for your ministry, could you share a couple of thoughts, maybe with a particular view towards hydrogen? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. So I will start by chance, or that's the asset of my country, because Mauritania has a very large, let's say, renewable energy resources and very large mining resources. And with a very strategic geographical position not far from Europe, and with an area where is a low density of population there, that is the best area of wind in the country. So that's why we think in terms of asset, we have a very good potential to produce very competitive green hydrogen. And that green hydrogen can transform our economy, not only to export green hydrogen, green ammonia and derivative for the international market, but also we can produce iron ore, because green steel and green iron ore, because the country is also one of the biggest producer of iron, and we have a huge resources of iron. And if the energy costs go down, we think that we have unlimited resource of the iron. That is our estimation. But of course the challenge is huge. The challenge is huge because the country has to have a capacity. We have to attract investors. We have started in a very good position, because we have attracted already 3 high quality partners. One of them is CWP, which is a partner of the Asian Renewable Hub, which is the first huge green hydrogen project in Australia. One of them is Chariot, with a team up with Total Eren, which is affiliate of Total, and which will have a Total technology and financial capacity behind. And the last one is BP. So we think this is our, let's say, chance to have. But as I said, the challenge are huge because we need to have a funding, we need to have a capacity, we need to make sure that this industry will be linked to our economy, not like, let's say, mining and oil and gas industry, which is almost offshore industry with regard to our economy, with regard to the job creation and all that aspect.
Well, and thank you for this overview and also this transition which we hear. I mean, you're mentioning major oil companies, of course, whom you've been working for a long time, probably. Now, to build up, for example, if you want to produce green steel, to build up electrolyzer capacity, to build up renewable production capacity, what would help? What is the thing that's lacking, or where are the bottlenecks at the moment? If you could mention 2 or 3 points.
Yeah, I think what is necessary is collaboration, as all our guests and honorable minister said, because we are doing this for Mauritania, but also for the world. So that's why we need some kind of collaboration. We have already some regional collaboration with some AGA member, 6 African states. But this is maybe to help harmonize the regulation and that as type of activity where the government has a role. But the industry has a role, the advanced country has a role, and we are working closely with the European Union and with Germany especially. And we are very interested in the H2 global initiative, and we are working with Africa-Vern, which is the business alliance between German and Africa, and we hope that will give us access to the German market and European market.
Thank you very much. So we will add to this wish list from this morning cooperation. I hope the 2 of you can connect afterwards. I would appreciate. And I would like to ask a question to Bjorn of Bosch Powertrain Solutions, because I would like to bring in the corporate side. What Mr. Lehbib just mentioned depends on cross-border collaboration on a political side, but also on an economic side. You cannot speak for all of Bosch probably, but based on your experience, what does it take? What is missing so we can see even more significant, investments in parts of the global south to drive up the hydrogen economy?
Well, I think so far in the discussion we learned about already innovation in technology, we learned about collaboration, cooperation, and let me probably sketch it from a different perspective. The technology part, we heard about technology readiness levels, cost. So if you ask me, technologies to produce green hydrogen, they have a very high TRL, technical readiness level. So I don't think we need, on the first place, more innovation in technologies. But we need to turn technologies into good products. That's a completely different thing. So to have the technology and to have a product that suits to a market and is successful is something different. So we need innovation to design products that are fitting to a market. And the later one is the largest problem. We don't have a green hydrogen market. We have good initiatives like H2 Global, but that's looking at the global challenge. That's a tiny establishment. We need much more design rules, ideas, innovations to design a global market for green hydrogen. And basically it would mean we need to remove fossil molecules in our primary energy system. So we need a global trade system for green molecules. That's much more than H2 Global is designed for time being. And only if we would have this, then we come to my wish list. And this is pretty much, we need innovations in business models. We are still running business models from the fossil age, how to distribute energy, use and distribute energy, and this we need to change.
Thank you. And this is also touching upon a point we made this morning, which is we need certainty. Businesses need certainty what to invest in and to make it into a business model. Now on the technological readiness, yes, the main types of electrolysis are well advanced, or some alkaline at least, but it's still relatively expensive compared to hydrogen out of natural gas, for example. So if I may ask, if I might turn to Apoba, you are associate partner with KPMG India. I'm sure you're not only, your work scope is not only in India, but of course you have this big knowledge about the country. Being such a rapidly developing country, what's your perspective on this discussion on technology readiness, availability of hydrogen, and maybe also cleaning existing hydrogen production?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. I think it's no doubt, and we have the shared understanding that hydrogen is imperative for deep decarbonization across countries. Specifically in developing economies like ours, by the time that we get to the mid-century, industry sector will actually overtake power sector emissions when we look at the national inventory, which is where deep decarbonization of the hard-to-abate sectors, specifically cement, iron and steel, freight, shipping, maritime, aviation, oil and gas, would become the key contributors to emissions. I think there's no doubt in our minds that hydrogen is probably the most versatile carrier of energy that can replace heat applications in most of these sectors. I think it's a very common misconception in a lot of people's minds is that switching your electricity can make a huge dent in your reduction in your emissions, which is not true, because more than 2/3 of your industry emissions actually come from process heat and from feedstock, right? And those are the hardest to abate. I completely agree with the speaker in front, before me, is that the good news is that technology is fairly proven today for hydrogen. It's at higher TRL levels as well, but there are challenges. I think the primary challenge is, even in terms of innovation, if you look at, hydrogen is a fairly energy dense carrier, but at the same time, there are various inefficiencies within the entire value chain, right? Or even for just the production process, if you look at that, there are various inefficiencies within the process. So for example, just the electrolysis process, you lose around 35 to 45% of, that as high as 45% of the energy in the electrolysis process. When you further convert that or liquefy that or convert that to derivatives like ammonia, you lose another 25-35%. When you take it to the next level, you transport it, you're almost losing 10% of the energy content right there. And then, when you're using it, for example, in applications like a fuel cell, you're losing another 40 to 50% of the energy that is contained within that hydrogen. So I think there are a lot of operational efficiencies yet to be achieved, which is, I think, where innovation and R&D plays an important role, which is where you need greater industry-academia collaboration, perhaps. This is on the technology side. But as a larger sort of point, I think investors are wary of investing in a lot of these technologies, specifically in developing countries, because the demand, they're not sure of the demand, whether it's in the medium or the long term. So demand aggregation needs to happen. A lot of new emerging concepts like hydrogen valleys, right? You've heard in the previous COP, a lot of countries got together to talk about collaboration, and they came up with 28 different sort of initiatives under the breakthrough agenda. India was one of them. And this year they particularly also outlined 28 initiatives, of which hydrogen is a major one, bringing the cost of hydrogen to parity in 2030, right? Through the use of, say, hydrogen valleys, and which sort of brings together the producers, suppliers, brings economies of scale, de-risks the investors, as well as reduces the cost of transportation, of storage and usage, which are some of the major barriers in hydrogen today. So I think there are various barriers, but at the same time there are solutions and innovative solutions that are now sort of being thought about by different countries.
And Apurva, thank you. You mentioned one point that's so important, and let's bring in the minister once more, our minister here on the panel. You mentioned the point of all the efficiency losses along the way. And unfortunately, there's a lot of, especially has been over the past 5 years, 10 years, a lot of very unfortunate allocations of funding for hydrogen applications where they don't make any sense. We heard it this morning, we had like a mythbuster section saying, first of all, we need to decarbonize the hydrogen demand that's there, and that's 99% gray out there, 90 million tons. Then we have to look what kind of industries there are we cannot decarbonize without hydrogen and allocate it there. Now, I would like to ask to Minister Siegesmund, we have had some bad examples over the past years in Germany, like federal ministers allocating research centers in their own states and doing further research on hydrogen for cars, small passenger cars, or things like this. So how do you make sure that you're advised in an optimum state to allocate the funding, which is scarce as well, to the right segments in hydrogen? How do you take these decisions within the government of Thuringia?
Well, obviously, efficiency is one of the key questions about hydrogen and a future business case for it. But we have laid the foundation for your question concerning cars, for instance, with our hydrogen strategy. And the main focus in the Thuringian hydrogen strategy are industrial products or support of companies. And I mean, it's quite obvious if you have renewables like a wind power plant and you put your energy in a car which is battery-based, an electronic battery-based car, it's much more efficient than to use green hydrogen. So I am very convinced that especially for all things concerning companies and industrial like steel production or the glass industry and other ways that will have a hydrogen future. Because we still have the problem with the high expenses and the high costs. So to make it quite clear, I don't see a future for cars based on hydrogen.
Thank you. And so maybe we can add to the list science policy cooperation is very important, so that policy is advised in an optimum way to take the right decisions. Mr. Lehbib, if I may follow up with a question on this. The country of Mauritania, the nation, it faces a big chance, there's a big opportunity out there with the energy transition worldwide. How do you prioritize the fields, because also you have limited resources probably in terms of your team at the ministry, or how do you prioritize the fields that you are working on? So how do you put them in the right order?
Let's say we have we just finished a roadmap for the development of a green hydrogen and identified a list of what we call the priority action for the country. And one of these priority, of course, is to produce green hydrogen and ammonia. Green hydrogen mainly for the local industry, and we are in a very advanced talk to industrial who is interested to do a green steel in the country. And that, if that happened for us, this is one of the biggest change that this energy transition policy can bring to the country, because from our independence we are producing iron ore, just producing iron ore without any value added for the country. And if only this one happened, it's already great. So the second option, which seems to be the most easiest for the country, is to export ammonia, because at this stage exporting green hydrogen itself, it seemed to be quite challenging in terms of transport and efficiency of the. So the ammonia seems to be one of the, say, ready solution, that there is a market already for that. That is the two options. After that, there is some other option. Let's one of them is to focus also on the bunkering of the fishery industry, which is one of the biggest industry in the country also. But maybe this is the third stage of the. But Mauritania, of course, we are not positioned ourselves to, let's say, subsidize the technology, because we are low-income country. We don't have this ability. We are, let's say, rely on the industry itself. We are relying on the industry and relying on the international cooperation with a partner who maybe have a benefit if this industry go well in the country. They can benefit from it, especially European market, which is very close to us, and they can benefit from all these, whether green ammonia, whether green steel, they can benefit from that.
Thank you. Apova, if I may ask you something. With the request, because we still want to take audience questions after this, but if you could specify, what would your main R&D recommendations for the Indian government be at the moment? What would be your top three? What should the Indian government focus on to drive the chances for India up to drive the energy transition harder?
I would say one would be setting up partnerships, setting up international trade corridors, because I think that the conversation that we've been hearing again and again in this particular COP, and you would have heard a lot of countries talk about how the cost of capital is so different between developed and developing countries, where the potential for decarbonization is just the opposite, right? And it's the same case with hydrogen, because a lot of countries which are fast adopters or faster manufacturers like Japan, Korea, EU, right? They have lesser area or space, and a lot of our modeling and forecasting studies show that they will run out of that space to generate renewable energy that can then generate green hydrogen. Whereas in countries like, countries of Egypt, countries in Africa, or Australia, they have huge sort of potential for renewables that can power it. So whether this international collaboration can sort of be enabled, which will then fill this demand-supply gap, I think that's one. Second is demand aggregation. I think is a very big issue that will bring in the economies of scale. It will also bring in greater certainty in the mind of the investor. So I think that is also very important. In India specifically, for example, the government has a plan of aggregating demand across refineries, the power sector, as well as mobile applications for hydrogen. Specifically, I agree that in passenger car segment, it doesn't make sense. But for example, in freight or shipping, I think this is a major sort of intervention. And I agree also on the fact that ammonia is probably a better carrier, although you lose a little bit in the conversion efficiency process. But ammonia is much easier to transport, much easier to store. So for applications such as in maritime and shipping, it's actually a better option. Third, I would say that looking at financing, I think that is another big challenge. Finding that long-term financing. Can it be tied into market mechanisms? Like you have a huge conversation on Article 6, and they're trying to finalize the guidelines. Can it feed into existing market mechanisms? How else can you aggregate demand, perhaps, for example, by making renewable purchase obligations for certain industries in terms of a mandatory limit as to how much you must produce through hydrogen or consume through hydrogen. So I think these are some of the sort of key ways in which governments can sort of drive demand, drive scale, and that can bring down costs and lead to adoption.
Great, thank you. Asking your neighbor, Bjorn, what would you like to add? You have a particular technical perspective on this as well.
Yeah, and the technical and probably also the investment decision-taking process. So you want to couple the supply and the demand side. I fully agree, but we should not look the inefficiencies as inefficiencies. We need to transform them into levelized cost of energy, how we call it. And my statement would be, from our point of industrialization, we have reached the point where the LCOE, levelized cost of energy, allows a business model. And the discussion about efficiencies, this is putting insecurity to the investor side, because they never know, should I focus on ammonia or methanol? That's all driven by efficiencies, but not by business case. So the business case makes it, at the end of the day, LCOE, we have to put in focus. The efficiencies, that's my business of tomorrow. In my R&D, I work on technologies that are better in efficiency, so I have better profit day after tomorrow. But now we need to start. We need to see that the business case is available, and we should lower the discussion on efficiencies, more on levelized cost of energy.
Which is bringing us back to the minister who said the business case oftentimes doesn't fly half an hour ago. Thank you all so much. That was really good. And I just wanted to give the audience, because we have a couple of minutes left, the chance to ask some questions. Any questions or ideas from the audience? There is one. Maybe we can...
Not the question, but an observation on India. You asked in terms of the what you would advise, to the government of India towards their net zero pathways, especially when it comes to the industry, and when the competitiveness of the industry is highly important, and we know that the economics is still evolving. Electricity sector is already a recipient of the large amount of subsidies across the different provinces. Government of India won't have ability to subsidize the industries and make hydrogen at par with other counterfactual fuels which they are using, and enable the decarbonization of the industry. So this is a challenge, I think, and it's not going to be so easy.
Thank you. I think this is a very important point between the global north and the global south. We will talk about it also in detail later this week on cement. In cement, it's a completely different story whether you're in Germany or you're in sub-Saharan Africa, for example. But Bjorn, you wanted to comment upon this? Did I take that right? Or?
I have to admit it was difficult to understand the question in really much in detail, but I assume it's something where do we have the value at the end of the day, right?
No, it's more about the gentleman was pointing to the fact that it's very hard in a country like India to subsidize whole industries like steel or cement. So it's already subsidies flow into the electricity sector. And of course, a country like Sweden or the United States or Japan has different capabilities to invest on a broad scale into decarbonizing industry than strongly growing emerging economies or developing countries have.
So if then I would have a comment to this indeed. So I fully agree. It's difficult if the levelized cost of energy would ask you for permanent subsidies. This wouldn't work. And this is where we also have to see what are the sectors, the applications, where we can make the first steps. And my home base is mobility. That's where I'm coming from with Bosch Powertrain Solutions. And mobility, even in Africa and other places, locally produced green hydrogen on a large scale is already competitive to any other fossil powertrain options you have in transport sector. So why not to start there, scale the industry, scale the market, establish the market, and then in a few years we also talk about cement and others, which are hard to abate, I fully agree, but why to stop those sectors that are already able to transform and just keep waiting, doing nothing for other sectors which are indeed hard to abate.
Okay, thank you very much for this. You have another comment?
No, just wanted to add to that. I think it's, like you said, it's very important to identify the sector where it makes sense, right? So for example, in the aviation sector, where the margins are thin, using green hydrogen, that could be a challenge. Passenger car segment, possibly not. But many other sectors which lend itself very well, and where cost might be competitive, I think it's not the same in all countries, very different for us. Once the prices come down to parity, say like $1, $1.5, then it's fair game. Right now the question, and we've had so many interactions with industry, they keep pointing out, who absorbs that extra cost? Within certain sectors, their margins are very thin. So then who takes that cost? And then how do we ensure that it comes to scale? And that will just happen when the cost of production goes down to levels of parity around $1.5 or $1.
Thank you very much. I just get the note we're running out of time, but we have further questions. I would encourage you to ask questions afterwards, right after the panel. I have one last question to all of you, which is, and we don't have time for 3 wishes, but we have time for 1 wish each to add to the list. You run into the Prime Minister, President, whatever of your country. I mean, you are almost at that level. But there's one thing you may ask them to accelerate the hydrogen economy. What would it be? I would like to start with you, Apurva, with just one point.
Yeah, I would say demand aggregation, which will scale up the demand, give that sort of certainty to the investor in the medium and long term, and will help reduce the costs.
Thank you. Noted. Bjorn.
Always think in global supply chains.
Okay.
And be aware that we have right now business models that were created for the fossil age and that needs to transform as well.
Great. Over to the Minister.
Yeah, to add this, think global and act local means to accept that innovation is not for free, that we have the preconditions to roll out the green hydrogen business case. And I would at last add, we do not have any further 15 years to wait until the business case flies. We have to do it now.
So speed up. Mr. Lehbib, you have the final word.
Yeah. For me, I think we did, as a government, we did what we can do now. We have to upgrade our capacity to manage our policy regarding the green hydrogen development. That is the last wish for me.
Thank you all so much. I would like to ask our audience to give a warm applause to this great group of panelists here today. And we will continue with a session on innovations in green hydrogen, the Innovators Laboratory, how we can drive innovation harder. So 2-minute break or 3 minutes maybe, and it would be great to see you back in here. Thank you.